Introduction. In the heart of ancient Greece lies a site steeped in mystery and reverence, Eleusis. This small, unassuming town, just a stone's throw from Athens, was the epicenter of one of the most secretive and transformative religious rites known to the ancient world, the Eleusinian Mysteries. Imagine walking through towering temple gates, where flickering torchlight casts long shadows on the faces of initiates, faces filled with equal parts awe and fear. Here, in Eleusis, the veil between the mortal and divine worlds was tantalizingly thin, and initiates dared to peer behind it. What secrets did they guard so fiercely? Well, if they told you, they'd have to make sure you never uttered a word to anyone, literally. Initiates were bound to secrecy so absolute that even today, despite all our research, much of what happened at Eleusis remains locked behind millennia of silence. So why did thousands of people, from commoners to kings, make the pilgrimage to this sacred place? Was it the promise of wisdom, the fear of the gods, or simply the hope of securing a cushier spot in the afterlife? Whatever it was, the allure of Eleusis echoed across the ancient world, and it still intrigues us today. As we venture into the world of Eleusis, imagine the palpable tension in the air as the rituals began. The promise of enlightenment, the fear of offending the gods, these were not mere ceremonies but profound, life-altering events. And who knows, perhaps by the end of this journey, you'll feel like you've taken part in the rites yourself. Ready? Let's pull back the curtain on Eleusis, where the divine and the mortal worlds danced in ways that left an indelible mark on history, location, and geographical importance. Eleusis, a modest town 20 kilometers northwest of Athens, wasn't just geographically significant, it was spiritually central to Greek life. You might think, 20 kilometers? That's practically a walk in the park. Well, sure, if that park is strewn with ancient ruins, mystic landscapes, and the expectation that you're about to uncover the secrets of the universe. But yes, it's not far. Close enough to the hustle and bustle of Athens, but distant enough to feel like you're crossing into another world entirely. In ancient times, Eleusis was perfectly positioned for spiritual pilgrimages while remaining deeply connected to the heart of Greek political and social life. Surrounded by lush, fertile plains and framed by gently sloping hills, the town was more than just a pretty face. Eleusis was deeply tied to agriculture, a fact that resonated in every part of it. The earth itself seemed to conspire with the gods here. The very fertility of the land mirrored the themes of the mysteries, the death and rebirth of nature, the cycles of life, death, and renewal. This was a place where crops flourished and where, symbolically, souls could find their own growth and rebirth. Moreover, the nearby sea was more than a picturesque backdrop. It was a critical element in the town's identity. Eleusis' proximity to the water symbolized the flow between the known and unknown, between life and the underworld. And yes, it also made trade easier, which meant that Eleusis was no backwater. It was a thriving center, deeply connected to the commercial and political networks of the region. But what was so special about the land itself? Well, for one, the plains of Eleusis were believed to be where Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, wandered in grief after losing her daughter Persephone. This connection to the divine made the soil feel almost sacred. Add in the fact that this was prime farming land, and you can see why Eleusis wasn't just another town. It was a place where the divine touched the mortal world, often quite literally in the form of fruitful harvests, or barren fields when the gods were displeased. It's easy to see why people believed that being part of the Eleusinian Mysteries wasn't just about individual enlightenment. It was about the fate of everyone. Who knew that farming could get this intense? And beyond all the spiritual and agricultural importance, Eleusis also played a unifying role among the Greek city-states. It was a place where all levels of society, from the lowliest farmer to the wealthiest aristocrat, could come together to worship and participate in the rites. The mysteries provided a spiritual glue that helped to hold the often fractured Greek world together. And when everyone's bound by the same sacred secrets, that's some sore. Just don't ask anyone to spill the beans. They won't. The Mysteries of Eleusis. Now, about those mysteries. What exactly went on? To this day, the details are still shrouded in, well, mystery. But what we do know is tantalizing enough. The Eleusinian Mysteries were a series of rites held in honor of Demeter and Persephone. For the initiates, these rites promised not just an understanding of life's mysteries, but a pathway to enlightenment and a brighter, more blessed afterlife. The mysteries unfolded in stages, beginning with the lesser mysteries, which acted as a sort of introduction for newbies. Think of it as a spiritual prelude, a way to prepare for the bigger, life-altering experience of the greater mysteries. These were held in autumn, and they were no casual affair. Pilgrims traveled to Eleusis, often with the kind of anxious anticipation you'd expect from someone about to uncover the meaning of existence. No pressure or anything. Initiates, called Mystai, These weren't just for show. They were designed to prepare the body and soul for the profound experiences that lay ahead. After all, you didn't want to have an epiphany on an empty stomach. Or maybe you did. In any case, the fasts were an essential part of the process, signaling the initiate's readiness to shed the trivial and embrace the sacred. Once prepared, the initiates participated in a variety of rituals, many involving symbolic reenactments of Persephone's descent into the underworld and her eventual return. This mirrored the agricultural cycles that were so vital to Greek life, the death of the crops in winter and their rebirth in spring. It was a direct line between the natural world and the spiritual, with initiates symbolically walking through death and emerging reborn, enlightened, and maybe a little hungry after all that face. The climactic moments of the mysteries included the revelation of sacred objects or knowledge, moments so profound that they were believed to change the initiate's life forever. And what were these sacred things? Well, if you think I'm going to tell you, think again. No one from ancient Greece ever did, so why should I be the first? The secrecy was, and still is, part of the allure. The initiates, once inducted, were bound by an oath of silence so strict it could be considered divine non-disclosure. Talk about a contract with the gods. But we do know this: the mysteries revolved around themes of life, death, and rebirth. For many initiates, participating in these rites was transformative, offering them a glimpse of divine truth. And perhaps, just perhaps, the belief that they had secured a better place in the afterlife. Front row seats, so to speak. At its core, Eleusis wasn't just about understanding the gods, it was about understanding the self. What could be more transformative than that? Well, aside from discovering the true recipe for ambrosia, but I digress. For the ancients, this was a sacred journey of enlightenment, one that reshaped their understanding of existence itself. Demeter and Persephone. To truly understand the Eleusinian Mysteries, we must dive into the myth at the heart of it all, the story of Demeter and Persephone. It's a tale filled with love, loss, and a sprinkling of seasonal doom and rebirth. More than just a good story, this myth encapsulated the very essence of the mysteries and shaped the rituals, beliefs, and even the agricultural practices of the ancient Greeks. So, what's the deal with Demeter and Persephone? Let's break it down. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, was the one who kept things growing. Crops flourished under her care, and humanity, in turn, flourished with the abundance she provided. You'd think being the literal goddess of agriculture would make life pretty sweet for Demeter, but even goddesses have bad days. Her worst day came when her daughter, Persephone, was snatched up by Hades, the god of the underworld. Here's the thing about Hades. Not exactly the romantic type. When he fell for Persephone, he didn't exactly wine and dine her. Instead, he did what any smitten god of death would do. He kidnapped her and dragged her down to the underworld to be his queen. I mean, sure, he could have sent flowers instead, but ancient gods had their own style, right? Demeter, naturally, was devastated. Losing her daughter was like losing a piece of herself, and her grief affected more than just her mood. It affected the entire world. While Demeter searched for Persephone, neglecting her divine duties, the earth withered. Crops failed, and famine spread. You know it's serious when a goddess lets all the wheat die. And so began the long winter of Demeter's grief, as she wandered the earth, refusing to let anything grow until her daughter was returned. In this story, we find the explanation for the changing seasons. While Persephone is with Hades in the underworld during the winter months, Demeter's sorrow brings cold and death to the land. When Persephone returns in the spring, Demeter's joy brings life and growth back to the earth. It's an eternal cycle, a divine reflection of the natural world's rhythms. Now, Persephone didn't just take up residence in the underworld without incident. Hades, clever as ever, tricked her into eating pomegranate seeds, an ancient way of binding someone to the underworld. As a result, she could only spend part of the year with her mother on the earth's surface. For the other part, she had to rule as queen of the underworld, and thus the cycle of life and death, summer and winter, was locked in place. This myth was not just a story, it was a lens through which the ancient Greeks understood life, death, and the mysterious forces governing the natural world. The Mysteries of Eleusis used this powerful tale as a vehicle for understanding the deeper mysteries of existence, birth, death, and rebirth, not just in the fields, but in the human soul. But it wasn't all somber contemplation. There's something relatable about Demeter's mom energy. She didn't care that Hades was the lord of the dead. He messed with her daughter, and she was ready to bring famine to the entire world until he set things right. Talk about maternal dedication. The myth's impact: life, death, and crops. The myth of Demeter and Persephone didn't just inspire poetry. It laid the foundation for the agricultural practices of the Greeks. Life depended on the cycles of nature, and the Greeks saw their fate as intimately connected to the emotional state of the gods. When Demeter was happy, things grew. When she wasn't, well, better store some grain for the winter. But the myth also spoke to something deeper: the human experience of loss and renewal. Just as the earth goes through its cycles of death and rebirth, so too does the human soul. The Mysteries of Eleusis offered initiates a glimpse into this cycle, providing them with the spiritual tools to understand that death was not the end, but a transformation, just like the winter gives way to spring. The myth's agricultural significance wasn't lost on the ancients, who celebrated Demeter as the bringer of fertility and sustenance. The Eleusinian Mysteries, with their secret rites, allowed initiates to participate in this divine drama. By reenacting the myth, they were not only paying homage to the gods, but also aligning themselves with the forces of life and growth. In a way, Demeter and Persephone were the ultimate farm-to-table experience, long before it became trendy. You could almost picture a humble Greek farmer looking out at his crops, offering a prayer to Demeter, and hoping she wasn't still in a bad mood over that whole Hades thing. Fertility, agriculture, and the mysteries. The mysteries of Eleusis were deeply tied to the agricultural cycles that shaped Greek life. In a world where survival depended on the whims of the seasons, the Eleusinian rites served not only as spiritual ceremonies, but as vital cultural rituals that reinforced the bond between the divine and the earth. The participants weren't just seeking personal enlightenment, They were participating in an ancient prayer for the Earth's fertility and their community's survival. Farming was serious business in ancient Greece. No tractors or pesticides here, just good old-fashioned divine intervention. The cycles of sowing and reaping were life itself, and Eleusis was the place where these cycles were ritualized in a way that made sense of life's greatest mysteries. The worship of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, was not just about reverence. It was about ensuring that the earth would continue to yield its gifts year after year. At the heart of the mysteries was the cyclical nature of life. Everything had its season. Life and death, sowing and harvest, joy and sorrow. The initiates of Eleusis, through the reenactment of Demeter's grief and joy, were tapping into the deeper rhythms of existence. The promise of the rites was simple but profound. Just as Persephone returned from the underworld, so too would the crops return. And so too might the human soul find its way back from the darkness of death. Initiates walked a delicate path, one that asked them to understand not just the agricultural cycles, but the broader, more existential cycles of life and death. By aligning themselves with these cycles, they sought to find peace in the impermanence of life, and perhaps a little reassurance that, like the earth itself, they would rise again. So, in a sense, every harvest in ancient Greece was a spiritual victory, a sign that Demeter had once again blessed the land, and that, for another season at least, life would continue. The long road to revelation. The journey to Eleusis wasn't just a metaphorical journey into the mysteries of life and death. It was a literal pilgrimage. Each year, initiates and participants would travel from Athens to Eleusis in a grand procession that symbolized the spiritual journey they were about to undertake. It was a pilgrimage that united the community, connecting the citizens of Athens with the divine drama playing out at Eleusis. This wasn't your average walk in the park. The great procession from Athens to Eleusis was a symbolic pilgrimage, full of rituals and rites. Participants walked roughly 20 kilometers, no Uber back then, as they made their way to the sacred site, chanting hymns, offering prayers, and carrying sacred objects. Along the way, there were moments of both revelry and solemnity, reflecting the dual nature of the mysteries themselves, joy and grief, life and death. Upon reaching Eleusis, the atmosphere shifted. The sense of anticipation was palpable. This was no casual stroll. It was a journey toward transformation. For those about to be initiated, the stakes were high. They were about to participate in rites that would change their understanding of life, death, and everything in between. Imagine the tension as the initiates entered the sacred space of Eleusis, stepping through gates that marked the boundary between the mortal world and the realm of the divine. What lay beyond was a mystery, literally. But whatever it was, it promised a revelation that would leave a lasting mark on their souls. And then there were the jokes. Yes, even in a ritual as solemn as the Eleusinian Mysteries, there was space for humor. The Greeks understood that laughter, too, had a place in the sacred. After all, what better way to celebrate the renewal of life than with a good joke? Sometimes it was a bawdy one, because, let's be honest, ancient Greeks knew how to have a laugh. The initiation rites. The initiation into the Eleusinian Mysteries was the heart of the experience, both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It was here, in the sacred sanctuary of Eleusis, that the mysteries of life and death were unveiled to those bold enough to seek them. But what exactly happened during these secretive rites? Well, here's the thing. No one really knows. The participants were sworn to absolute secrecy, and they took that promise seriously. So seriously, in fact, that no detailed accounts of the ceremonies have survived. What we do know, however, is enough to paint a fascinating picture. The journey of initiation began with preparation. Initiates, known as Mystai, underwent a series of purifying rituals. These often included fasting, bathing in the Boo. Picture a group of Athenians, stripped of their usual daily concerns, fasting in preparation for what they believed would be a life-changing experience. And it wasn't just about being physically clean. This purification was symbolic. The Mystai were preparing to leave behind the ordinary world and enter a sacred space where the gods themselves would touch their souls. Once they were prepared, the initiates were led into the Telesterion, the Great Hall at Eleusis. This building, a massive rectangular structure, was one of the largest and most impressive in the ancient world. Its dark, windowless interior would have created an intense, almost otherworldly atmosphere, the perfect setting for the deep mysteries that were about to unfold. Now, imagine being inside the Telesterion. Darkness surrounds you. The only light comes from flickering torches casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air is thick with anticipation. What comes next is unknown. For the initiates, this was a powerful metaphor. The darkness represented ignorance, fear, and death, while the light symbolized knowledge, understanding, and the promise of life renewed. This wasn't just about understanding the myth of Demeter and Persephone on an intellectual level. It was about experiencing the mystery of existence firsthand. The rites themselves? Scholars speculate that they involved reenactments of the Demeter-Persephone myth, with a focus on Persephone's journey to the Undidae. There may have been moments of dramatic revelation, where sacred objects, possibly symbols of fertility like ears of grain, were displayed to the initiates. These objects, seemingly simple, carried immense symbolic weight, representing the rebirth of life from death, the return of the harvest after the barren winter. At some point during the ceremony, the initiates would have been shown or told something that was considered the ultimate secret, the epoptia, a revelation so profound that it was believed to change the initiate's understanding of life and death forever. One can only imagine what thoughts must have raced through their minds as they glimpsed what they believed was a divine truth. And then, the light. Just as Persephone emerged from the darkness of the underworld, the initiates were brought from the darkness of the Telesterion into the light, symbolizing their spiritual rebirth. They had passed through the symbolic death of ignorance and emerged into the enlightenment of divine understanding. But not everything was solemn. The Greeks understood that life was a balance of opposites, and laughter was just as sacred as tears. It's said that during certain parts of the rites, initiates were encouraged to laugh, perhaps at crude jokes, perhaps at the absurdity of life and death. Imagine standing in the midst of one of the most serious spiritual experiences of your life, only to be hit with a bawdy joke. It's like the ancient Greeks were saying, hey, even in the face of mortality, we can still find something to laugh about. The final revelation. The culmination of the initiation rites was the Great Revelation, a moment designed to leave an indelible mark on the minds and souls of the initiates. While we don't know exactly what this revelation entailed, the impact it had was profound. Some historians believe the final mystery revealed was a vision of the gods themselves, or a dramatic display symbolizing the unity of life and death, possibly enacted through symbolic objects or sacred light. The experience was meant to give initiates the reassurance that death was not the end, but a transformative passage. Persephone's return from the underworld wasn't just a myth, it was a promise. Life would return, and death, while inevitable, was not something to be feared. For the Greeks, this was a revolutionary idea. Unlike other religious traditions that viewed the afterlife as bleak or joyless, the Eleusinian Mysteries promised a blessed existence beyond death for those who were initiated. And what about those who weren't initiated? Well, too bad for them. The uninitiated were left in the dark, figuratively and literally, as to what happened inside the telesterion. Only those who had been initiated had the secret knowledge to face death with confidence. It wasn't just about understanding a myth. It was about changing how you lived, how you died, and what came after. Interestingly, while most participants came out of the mysteries with a newfound sense of spiritual confidence, the promise of secrecy remained unbroken. Whatever was revealed during the initiation, initiates never shared it with outsiders. Perhaps it wasn't just because of their oath. Maybe the experience was so personal, so transformative, that it was impossible to explain to anyone who hadn't walked the same path. It was something that had to be felt, not told. The philosophical impact. The mysteries weren't just for farmers and common folk. They also attracted some of the greatest minds of the time: philosophers, playwrights, and statesmen. One of the most famous initiates was Plato, whose philosophy was deeply influenced by the ideas and experiences of Eleusis. When you think about Plato's famous allegory of the cave, it's hard not to see parallels with the Eleusinian experience. In the allegory, prisoners are trapped in a cave, seeing only shadows on. When one prisoner is freed and steps out into the light, he sees the true world for the first time, the forms, the real essence of things. Plato described this moment of enlightenment as life-changing, much like the initiates of Eleusis, who, after leaving the telesterion, saw the world in a completely new light. Plato's focus on the immortality of the soul, the journey from ignorance to knowledge, and the relationship between the material world and the world of forms all echo the lessons of the mysteries. For Plato, life was a series of transitions, much like the seasonal cycles of death and rebirth celebrated at Eleusis. He even suggested that true philosophers, those who seek wisdom and knowledge, are the ones who have metaphorically been initiated, who have left behind the darkness of ignorance to see the divine truth. It's no wonder that Eleusis, with its dramatic rituals and profound teachings about life and death, became a kind of philosophical touchstone for Greek thinkers. The mysteries offered a framework for understanding the world that went beyond intellectual reasoning. It was about experience, transfo, legacy, and modern fascination. As the ancient world faded, so did the Eleusinian Mysteries, victims of the rise of Christianity and the suppression of pagan practices. But the fascination with Eleusis never really went away. Even today, people are drawn to the mysteries that surrounded the site, wondering what secrets were shared inside the telesterion and what initiates truly experienced. In modern times, Eleusis has become a symbol for those on a spiritual quest, a reminder that the search for meaning is as old as humanity itself. The story of Demeter and Persephone still resonates, as does the idea that life and death are part of an eternal cycle. And of course, the allure of secrecy never fades. There's something about a ritual that promises transformation while keeping its secrets that continues to captivate the human imagination. Archaeologists and historians continue to explore the ruins of Eleusis, piecing together the physical remnants of the site. But no matter how many stones are uncovered or how many artifacts are studied, the true heart of the Eleusinian Mysteries remains elusive. Perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the real mystery is not in what was revealed, but in the journey itself, in the willingness to confront the darkness, to seek out the light, and to laugh in the face of life's greatest challenges. In the end, the story of Eleusis is a reminder that while life may be filled with questions, doubts, and fears, there's always the promise of spring after winter. And if you can find something to laugh about along the way, so much the better. The eternal legacy of Eleusis. The mystery of Eleusis transcends both time and place, representing not merely an ancient religious practice but a universal spiritual journey. Through the veil of its secret rites, the Greeks sought answers to the great enigmas of existence. life, death, and what lies beyond. What made the Eleusinian Mysteries so powerful was their ability to deeply transform each participant, offering a profound insight into the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The beauty of Eleusis was not only in its gods and myths, but in its broader symbolism, which resonates with human lives even today. Just as Persephone returned to the light after her descent into the underworld, each of us, in our personal journeys, seeks to emerge from the darkness of ignorance into the light of understanding. This desire for deeper meaning, for something beyond the tangible, is what connects us to those ancient initiates. Eleusis, over the centuries, shaped philosophy, art, and even the very notion of spirituality. Today, we continue to draw inspiration from this quest for the divine and the transcendent, whether through religious traditions, philosophical exploration, or personal introspection. Though the exact secrets of the rites remain lost to time, perhaps the true mystery lies in the human experience itself, our capacity to confront the unknown, to seek meaning, and to find light in even the darkest moments. The legacy of Eleusis, therefore, is not just found in its ruins or the myth of Demeter and Persephone, but in our ongoing search for purpose and renewal. Just like the ancient Greeks, we continue to seek transformation, to explore the depths of our souls, and to celebrate the possibility of rebirth.
By my side, intense, strong, no fear to face, nowhere to hide, intense. I subscribe to this channel, click like today, because content like this just lights my way. Intense and slow.